Her superior made her serve lunch to the generals as a lesson in humility, or so he said. Captain Mara Ellison understood the subtext immediately. She had spoken out of turn during the morning briefing, questioned a supply rerouting that favored optics over ground reality, and embarrassed a colonel who preferred obedience to accuracy. By noon, she was reassigned from operations to protocol support, which meant balancing silver trays and keeping her eyes lowered while men with rows of ribbons discussed wars like weather. She buttoned her jacket carefully, fingers lingering for a half-second on the old insignia sewn just above her heart, then smoothed the fabric flat as if smoothing herself into compliance. The mess hall reserved for visiting brass smelled of polished wood and roast beef, a quiet cathedral of rank where voices softened and laughter never quite reached the walls. Mara entered through the side door with the other aides, a line of pressed uniforms and practiced smiles. She had done this before, years ago, back when she was a lieutenant learning how to disappear. The tray felt heavier than it should have, the weight of porcelain and expectation. Her superior, Colonel Hasker, watched from the corner, arms folded, a thin satisfaction in his eyes. This would remind her, he thought, of her place. She moved from chair to chair, setting plates down with measured care, keeping her gaze at chest level as protocol demanded. The generals spoke in clipped tones about timelines and air corridors, about the confidence of maps. One joked about the coffee, another complained about the rain. Mara listened without listening, counting steps, noting exits, the old habits flickering awake even as she played the role assigned to her. When she reached the head of the table, she felt the pause before she heard it, the subtle intake of breath, the silence that spreads like spilled ink. "Captain," a voice said, calm but curious. "Hold a moment." She froze, tray hovering. The voice belonged to General Rowan Hale, a man whose reputation was a study in contradictions, brilliant and blunt, ruthless and precise. He leaned back slightly, eyes not on her face but on her chest. The silver star caught the light, just a glint, easily missed by anyone not trained to look for the small truths that matter. "That's an odd placement," Hale said softly. "You don't see many of those anymore." Mara's pulse quickened. She had never been asked about it. Most people didn't know what it was. She considered deflection, the safe answer, but something in Hale's gaze told her he already knew. "Sir," she said, steady, "it's from my previous command." The table went still. A general to Hale's left frowned, leaning in. "Previous command?" he echoed. "Captain, that device is a silver star," Hale finished for him. He nodded once, as if confirming a private calculation. "Awarded for gallantry, usually earned the hard way." Colonel Hasker shifted in the corner. "General," he said quickly, "Captain Ellison is assisting with lunch today. We can discuss decorations another time." Hale didn't look at him. "No," he said, and the word carried weight without volume. "We can discuss it now." He turned back to Mara. "Where did you serve, Captain?" Mara set the tray down carefully, hands suddenly light. "Eastern Ridge, sir. Task Force Ember. Year 4. A murmur rippled around the table. Ember had been a bad year, a name spoken less and less as new operations layered over old scars. Hale's eyes sharpened. "I read the after-action reports. They were incomplete." "They usually are," Mara replied before she could stop herself. A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, crossed Hale's face. "Tell us, what did they miss?" She hesitated. Every instinct screamed caution. But the room had shifted. The rules were no longer the same. "They missed the part where we were outnumbered 3-1. They missed the part where the evac was scrubbed twice. They missed the part where my platoon held a pass for 18 hours so a convoy could slip through a valley that wasn't supposed to matter." Silence again, heavier now. One of the generals cleared his throat. "Captain," he said, "why are you serving lunch?"
Hasker opened his mouth, but Hale raised a hand. I asked her. She'll answer. Mara met the general's eyes for the first time. Because I questioned a plan. Because I was told to remember my place. Hale smiled, not kindly. Ah, yes, places. He turned his chair slightly, addressing the table. Gentlemen, I propose we rearrange a few. He stood, the room following suit by reflex. Captain Ellison, take a seat. The words seemed to echo. Hasker's face went pale. General, Colonel, Hale cut in, you assigned a decorated combat officer to wait tables as a corrective measure. That says more about your command climate than her attitude. He gestured to an empty chair. Beside me. Sit, Captain. Mara did, legs steady beside the tremor running through her. The chair felt unfamiliar, the angle wrong, as if she'd stepped into a photograph not meant to include her. Hale resumed his seat. Now, he said, about that rerouting. What followed was not a lecture, but a conversation. Hale asked questions that cut through assumptions, that invited details instead of dismissing them. Mara answered, carefully at first, then with growing confidence as she realized she was being heard. She spoke of ground realities, of supply lines that looked efficient on screens, but bled time and lives in dust and rain. She spoke of Ember, not as a badge, but as a lesson learned with cost. The generals listened. Some frowned. One took notes. When lunch ended, Hale rose again. Captain Ellison, you'll brief my staff this afternoon, full hour. He turned to Hasker. Colonel, you'll attend, and afterward we'll discuss leadership. Yes, sir, Hasker said, voice tight. The afternoon passed in a blur of maps and markers, questions and answers. Mara felt the old fire return, the clarity that came when purpose aligned with action. When it was over, Hale lingered. You kept the star, he said, almost to himself. I did, Mara said. It reminds me. Of what? Of who I answer to, the people beside me. Hale nodded. Good answer. He paused. You know, there are people who mistake humility for weakness. Mara smiled faintly. They usually haven't carried a pass. Weeks later, the rerouting was revised. Casualties dropped. Hasker was reassigned to a desk far from decisions. Mara was offered a promotion she accepted only after negotiating protections for her team. The silver star remained where it was, a quiet truth stitched into cloth. And sometimes, when the room went silent for reasons that mattered, she would feel its weight, not as a burden, but as proof that being seen can change the shape of things. For more thrilling, emotional, and unforgettable stories, don't forget to subscribe, hit like, and share with friends who love powerful twists.